Right, so there's this bloke, President of the United States, most powerful man in the world, and he's about to lose everything because of a burglary. Not just lose his job, lose his reputation, his legacy, his place in history, everything. And here's the mental part. He didn't need to do it. He was already winning, ahead in the polls by an absolute mile, about to win the biggest landslide election in American history. But he did it anyway, because he was paranoid. His name? Richard Nixon. And what he did in 1972 didn't just destroy him personally. It shattered America's trust in government, changed their laws, changed their entire political system, turned the FBI and CIA into absolute war zones. This whole situation, this notorious chain of events, entered world history as the Watergate scandal. And if you think you know the story, I promise you there's stuff here that'll blow your mind. Because this isn't just about a break-in, mate. This is about how power corrupts absolutely, how paranoia destroys everything, and how one stupid decision, one moment of weakness can unravel an entire presidency. By the end of this, you'll understand why Americans still don't trust their politicians, why the word Watergate became shorthand for massive government conspiracy, and why every scandal since then gets Dusty Gate added to the end of it. Stick with me, because this gets proper wild. Before we get to the burglary itself, you need to understand what America was like in the early 1970s, because it was an absolute mess, mate. Proper chaos. The Vietnam War had been going on for over a decade. American troops stuck in this jungle war. Thousands dead. For what? Nobody even knew anymore. And the war was tearing American society apart from the inside. University students protesting, riots in the streets, the whole country split right down the middle about whether this war even made sense. Should we be in this war? Is this worth it? Why are our boys dying over there? Nobody had good answers. And Nixon, Richard Nixon, he's the president trying to hold this all together while everything's falling apart. Now, Nixon was actually pretty brilliant at foreign policy. Smart bloke when it came to international relations and strategy. But domestically, the country was coming apart at the seams. And then things got worse. June 1971. The Pentagon Papers get leaked. Now, if you don't know what the Pentagon Papers are, let me explain. This was a massive classified report, 7,000 pages, commissioned by former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. It detailed America's political and military involvement in Vietnam from 1945 all the way to 1967. This report covered multiple presidents: Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Democrats and Republicans, both parties. And when parts of this classified report started getting published in the New York Times, it revealed something absolutely huge. The government had been deliberately lying to the American people about the war for decades, painting a rosy picture of a failing war, bombing countries like Cambodia and Laos, countries that were supposedly neutral but were helping North Vietnam, secret operations, stuff even Congress didn't know about. The person who leaked this information to the New York Times? A former military analyst named Daniel Ellsberg. And as soon as the Times started publishing it, the Nixon administration went mental. They tried to stop the publication immediately. When they couldn't do it legally, they went to court, claiming that publishing this information was a threat to national security. But in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that publishing this information was not illegal. Freedom of the press, in it. First Amendment. And when the American public read what was in those papers, absolute chaos. The information revealed in the New York Times set American society on fire. And that's not an exaggeration. It sparked a new wave of anti-war protests across the entire country. And when the Nixon administration decided to bomb Cambodia as well, it was like a time bomb exploding. At Kent State University in Ohio, students protested against all of this. And the state governor, get this, ordered them to be shot. 4 students killed. 9 more wounded. The result? More than 900 universities with over 4 million students went on strike. This is still considered the only time in American history that the entire university system was simultaneously paralyzed. The whole system. Shut down. Various groups interpreted this as the moment when the war America started abroad finally came home to roost. Add to this rising inflation and intensifying civil rights struggles, and the 1970s were looking like an extremely challenging period for the Nixon administration. Everything was going wrong at once. So that's the context. America in crisis, Nixon under pressure, the country falling apart. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite all these crises at home, Nixon's foreign policy team had actually achieved some remarkable progress by 1972. Right, so while America's burning domestically, Nixon pulls off something absolutely mental on the international stage. After a 25-year break, a quarter of a century, Nixon moves to establish diplomatic relations with China. That's huge, mate. For 25 years, America and China hadn't spoken. Total freeze. Cold War politics. Complete shutdown. Nixon becomes the first American president to visit China. Ever. He meets with Chinese leader Mao Zedong, meets with Premier Zhou Enlai. These are massive historical figures. And why is he doing this? Strategy in it. The goal? Managing the challenges posed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The Americans were clearly trying to take advantage of the divisions between the Soviet Union and China over socialist ideology. Play them against each other. Classic divide and conquer. This visit also opened China up to the world. The agreements made during this visit became the foundation for future China-America relations, still relevant today. So in February 1972, Nixon visits China. Massive deal, historic moment. And then, just 3 months later, he decides to visit the Soviet Union as well. This also makes him the first American president to set foot in Moscow. First one ever. Meeting with Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, Nixon worked to create a whole bunch of agreements to improve relations between the two superpowers. The most historic of these? The Nuclear Arms Limitation Treaty. Even today, people believe this treaty was a major contribution to world peace, limiting the number of nukes each side could have, preventing total annihilation. Beyond that, agreements to open up trade markets that had been closed for decades were also significant achievements from Nixon's Soviet visit. These successes in foreign policy and diplomacy greatly elevated Nixon's image in the eyes of the American public. Instead of being seen as a warmonger stuck in Vietnam, Nixon was being repositioned in American politics as someone who valued peace and could see the future, a visionary. This was an important transformation both for him personally and for America as a whole. On the other hand, since the idea of establishing relations with China had been advocated by Democrats for a long time, they didn't really have the ability to criticize Nixon's actions on this. He'd stolen their idea and made it work. So as the 1972 presidential election approached, Nixon was in a much stronger position than his Democratic opponents. The only real problem was the attitude of young people towards the Vietnam War. They still hated it, still protesting. But overall, by the time the election year arrived, Nixon was highly confident about victory. His campaign team, though, they wanted more than just a win. They wanted to make Nixon's second-term victory not just a win, but an unprecedented landslide. Total domination. To do this, Nixon's campaign team decided to do something nobody had done before at this level. Something illegal. Something stupid. Something that would destroy everything. The person who got the Democratic Party nomination to run against Republican Richard Nixon for president in 1972 was George McGovern. McGovern entered the presidential race with a promise to immediately withdraw American troops from Vietnam. Just pull them out. End it. Against him, Nixon also presented a promise to end the war. But Nixon's propaganda machine worked to make people interpret it differently, as peace with honor, not just running away, ending it the right way. Even though polls showed Nixon was ahead of the Democratic candidate by a massive margin, real campaign heat was created when campaign activities began, both sides going hard, rallies, debates, attack ads, the whole political circus. And it's during this intense election heat that Nixon's campaign team decides to pull off something absolutely mental. They're going to break into the Democratic Party headquarters, bug the place, listen to everything, get every bit of inside information. Why? Because they're paranoid. They want total control. They want to know everything the opposition is planning. The place they're targeting? The Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. This is a luxury office building right on the Potomac River. Proper posh place. And it happens to be where the Democratic Party has their headquarters. So on a summer night in June 1972, a 5-person crew breaks into the Watergate building. At first, this looks like just a regular burglary. Nothing special. But what these 5 blokes are caught with is going to blow the lid off everything. Right, so it's a June night in 1972. The Watergate complex. Washington, D.C. 5 men break in, quietly, professionally. But there's a security guard working at the complex. Frank Willis, just doing his rounds. And Willis gets suspicious. He notices something odd. There's thick tape, duct tape, placed over a door lock to keep it from locking, stopping the door from closing properly. At first, Willis thinks maybe someone did this accidentally. Maintenance or something. So he removes the tape, continues his rounds. But when he comes back, there's another piece of tape. Same spot, same door. That's when he realizes this was done deliberately. Someone wants this door to stay unlocked. He immediately calls the local police. When police officers arrive, the burglars are still inside the office complex. They haven't finished yet, so police are able to arrest everyone without any problems, catch them red-handed. And the police officers themselves must have been surprised by what they found. These blokes weren't your typical burglars, mate. They were dressed in fancy suits, professional, organized, and the nature of the equipment they had? Absolutely mental. Sequentially numbered bundles of cash, high-tech surveillance equipment, devices that could secretly listen to phone conversations, miniature cameras, lock-picking tools. They also had modern walkie-talkie devices and equipment that could listen to conversations from a distance. It was clear from the start that their goal in entering the Watergate complex wasn't to steal property or valuables. This was espionage. Now here's where it gets interesting. The leader of this burglary crew? James McCord, former CIA officer. But here's the most important thing. He was serving as the chief of security for Nixon's re-election campaign committee. So it immediately started looking like this burglary was connected to Nixon's campaign. Direct connection. But the other 4 members of the crew? All Cuban nationals. Bernard Barker, Virgilio Gonzalez, Eugenio Martinez, Frank Sturgis. These 4 Cubans were all involved in this operation. Now, it was well known, even to American intelligence agencies, that Cubans like these, who had fled Cuba to America because they hated Castro's socialist rule or were just attracted to money, often engaged in illegal activities like this. They'd frequently been used for covert operations by the CIA. Deniable assets, in it. Do the dirty work, and if they get caught, the government can claim they don't know them. So even though it appeared this burglary attempt was connected to Nixon's campaign, many people initially believed this might just be a small-scale operation. Just trying to get some information. No big deal. However, when it was discovered that this crew's activities were connected to a special investigation unit called the Plumbers, which had been set up under the leadership of a former CIA agent named Howard Hunt, much more attention focused on the Watergate incident. The Plumbers unit, established under the White House presidential staff, had the primary goal of preventing classified information, like the Pentagon Papers we mentioned earlier, from being disclosed, stopping leaks, hence the name Plumbers. Beyond that, it was also revealed that Gordon Liddy, a former FBI agent, had close connections with this group, and that he was a member of Nixon's campaign committee. This intensified suspicions about the burglary crew's activities. So now you've got former CIA officers, former FBI agents, Cuban contractors, all connected to Nixon's campaign. This isn't looking good. The connection between Nixon's campaign and the Watergate break-in was further confirmed when it was revealed that the large amount of money provided for the burglary crew's expenses was also connected to Nixon's campaign. All the cash bills found with the burglars were sequentially numbered, and they were found to be part of donation money given by a Republican Party supporter. Direct paper trail, from Republican donors to the burglars' pockets. As these facts were revealed one by one, Nixon committed an even more serious crime. Claiming it was a threat to national security, Nixon ordered the FBI to interfere with the investigation. This was clearly an abuse of presidential power, using the office of the president to obstruct justice. But at this point, most people still think this is just a burglary. A scandal, sure, but not that serious. They have no idea how deep this goes. Now, most scandals get buried. Yeah? Covered up. Forgotten. But two journalists working at the Washington Post weren't going to let that happen. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. These two blokes absolutely refused to let this incident get buried under the sands of time. While everyone else dismissed it as just a burglary, these two kept digging, kept investigating, kept asking questions. By October 1972, just months after the break-in, they had revealed that this incident was connected to Nixon's re-election campaign. But here's the problem. They didn't have strong enough evidence to prove it. Not yet. It's all circumstantial. Connections, coincidences, but no smoking gun. And about a month later, in November 1972, Nixon manages to record a massive victory in the presidential election held amidst all this scandal. How massive? He wins 49 out of 51 electoral districts in America. McGovern of the Democratic Party only manages to win Massachusetts and Washington, D.C. That's IT. So it became clear that Nixon's campaign had very successfully suppressed both the public protests about the Vietnam War and all the allegations about the Watergate incident. Total domination. Exactly what they wanted. Nixon's sitting pretty, re-elected president, landslide victory, everything's going his way. But Woodward and Bernstein? They're not done. Not even close. And there's something else. Something they haven't revealed yet. The way they're getting their information? They've got a source. Deep inside the government. They call him Deep Throat. Code name. Secret identity. And this source is feeding them information, piece by piece, guiding their investigation. Follow the money, Deep Throat tells them. Follow the money. And they do. After Nixon's second victory, the investigation and trial related to the Watergate burglary moved forward. Hunt and Liddy, the former CIA and FBI agents, admitted that their goal was not just to steal information from inside the Democratic Party office. They wanted to secretly monitor all activities happening during the campaign. Everything. Every conversation. Every strategy meeting. Every decision. McCord and the burglary crew were employed to install miniature microphones, cameras, and other high-tech surveillance equipment for this purpose. The planners must have believed that by using third-party individuals, the Cuban nationals and former spies who'd been used for CIA operations for years, they could protect both the success and secrecy of this operation. Plausible deniability in it. If they get caught, just blame it on rogue agents. So in the trial before Judge John Sirica, they claimed that the plan was theirs, just them. Nobody higher up was involved. However, Judge Sirica didn't believe it, not for a second. He strongly believed that there was a connection at a higher level than campaign committee officials to this operation. Someone more powerful was pulling the strings. Judge Sirica, who strongly believed that former CIA officers, an FBI agent, and Cuban contractors had been used as scapegoats to protect the real people in charge, showed some leniency toward the defendants. He hinted that relief could be provided if they cooperated with the court. If they told the truth. The result? McCord, who had acted as the leader of the burglary crew, submitted a personal confession in writing to the judge. He admitted that in addition to the money he'd agreed to receive for carrying out this operation, he had received a large sum of extra money, and that he had been ordered from above to remain silent and plead guilty in court. Keep his mouth shut. Take the fall. It should also be noted that the firm policy Judge Sirica displayed during this judicial process resulted in him being given the nickname Maximum John, because he gave maximum sentences to anyone who didn't cooperate. After the trial, the Senate was tasked with investigating this matter properly. Get to the bottom of it. The select committee appointed for this was chaired by Sam Ervin, a Democratic senator representing North Carolina. He was a lawyer by profession and was considered an expert on constitutional law, proper legal mind. This select committee, appointed in February 1973, began taking testimony in May of that year. And this was a unique moment in American history, absolutely unprecedented. Why? Because the testimony of White House staff members before Senate committee members was broadcast live on 3 major television networks. Everyone could watch, the whole country tuning in. During this testimony process, information flowed out about political dirty tricks, covering up activities with money, using government agencies for political purposes, revealing a whole bunch of abuses of power in the existing administration. This testimony compilation process, which went on for a couple of months, was watched live by millions of Americans, people glued to their TVs, watching their government get exposed in real time. But until a specific day in July, the most important information about this conspiracy had not been revealed yet. Everything's about to change. The person scheduled to testify on this particular day in July was Alexander Butterfield. His official position? Nixon's unofficial second assistant. Close to the president. Until he testified, this testimony compilation process had relied on contradictory personal statements. He said, she said. No hard evidence. But everything turned against Nixon when Butterfield stated before the Senate Select Committee something absolutely mental. A system had been installed to secretly record all conversations in the Oval Office starting in 1971. Every single conversation. He said that all types of communications, including all phone conversations that occurred in the Oval Office, the president's personal official office, were recorded on these tapes, and through them, all information related to the Watergate incident could be obtained. The entire room went silent because everyone immediately understood what this meant. If the tapes exist, the truth exists. No more he said, she said, just cold, hard evidence. Nixon immediately realized he'd basically trapped himself. So he prepared for a counterattack. Using presidential powers and privileges, the president's side argued that these tapes could not be made public or listened to. Executive privilege, national security, presidential confidentiality. At that point, Nixon even ordered Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, who had been working hard to obtain the tapes, to be fired from his position using presidential powers. Just sacked him. Gone. This further intensified the controversy because it looked exactly like what it was, a cover-up. Protesting this action, Attorney General Elliot Richardson and Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus announced their resignations from their positions that very night. Both of them quit in protest. This action, which occurred on a Saturday night in October 1973, entered history as the Saturday Night Massacre. Absolute chaos. The top law enforcement officials in America resigning in protest against the president. Facing public protests and outrage, Nixon appointed a new special prosecutor to replace Cox, Leon Jaworski. However, Nixon still didn't hand over the Oval Office tapes to Jaworski either. Refused point blank. The dispute about the tapes went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Nixon's side presented the argument that the tapes contained information that could harm national security. They also raised the issue of presidential privilege again. The Supreme Court heard arguments from both sides, deliberated, considered, and then they made their decision. After carefully considering the arguments presented by both sides, the Supreme Court unanimously, all 9 justices, ordered that those tapes be presented to the Senate Select Committee. No exceptions, no executive privilege, hand them over. Nixon had no choice. He had to comply. When those tapes were made public and broadcast, the entire nation got to hear clear recordings of the president ordering the CIA to stop the FBI investigation. His own voice. Undeniable. Giving orders to obstruct justice. One tape in particular, recorded on June 23, 1972, just 6 days after the Watergate burglary, revealed that President Nixon was directly involved in the cover-up operation from the very beginning. This tape became public under the nickname Smoking Gun, because that's exactly what it was. The definitive proof, the evidence that couldn't be denied. Nixon was finished. As a result, Smoking Gun tape being released, the House Judiciary Committee filed charges against the president under 3 categories with the purpose of presenting articles of impeachment against him. The charges: obstruction of justice, abuse of power, contempt of Congress. Impeachment was coming. There was no stopping it now. By the beginning of August 1974, even Nixon's own party, his Republican allies, had turned against him. Even the president's closest associates were saying that impeachment was inevitable. He'd lost all support. So on August 8, 1974, addressing the nation live on television, Nixon announced he would resign, making it clear he wasn't prepared to face impeachment. He was quitting first. The next day, August 9th, he left the White House without even saying goodbye to the media. Just walked out. Got on a helicopter. Gone. This conspiracy called Watergate came to an end with his departure from the White House. Richard Nixon became the first and only president in American history to resign from office. total disgrace, complete destruction of his legacy, all because of a burglary he didn't even need to authorize. He was already winning, but paranoia destroyed him. The impact of Watergate on America was massive. This conspiracy that occurred at the highest level of the American government caused the American people's trust in their government, which had been at a very high level of about 70% before this incident, to collapse significantly. Just plummeted. People felt betrayed, lied to, manipulated. Although trust was somewhat restored over time, it never reached the level it was at before Watergate. Never. To this day, Americans are more skeptical of their government because of what Nixon did. Beyond that, the most important transformation that occurred because of the Watergate incident was the limitation of the American president's powers. Legislators acted to limit the president's power, especially in declaring war and making decisions about national security without congressional approval. Also, laws were strengthened to increase transparency in campaign financing after this incident. You couldn't just throw secret money around anymore. Beyond that, the enactment of laws and regulations to protect journalists and guarantee the security of whistleblowers, those who expose government conspiracies, was also an important result of this incident. Watergate proved that a free press is essential to democracy. Without Woodward and Bernstein, Nixon might have gotten away with it. This incident remains in world history as a moment when the balance of power between the three main pillars of American government, the executive, legislative, and judiciary, was better balanced. It demonstrated how checks and balances actually work in practice, how no one, not even the president, is above the law. The fact that even in such an extremely controversial situation, the country's governance didn't collapse should be taken as evidence of the strength of the American system. The institutions held. Democracy survived. After Nixon's resignation, Gerald Ford, who took over the presidency, managed to govern without problems and also supported the reforms the people were demanding. However, Ford made a controversial decision that many people still debate today. Ford decided to grant a presidential pardon for all charges against Richard Nixon. Just wipe the slate clean. Nixon would never face criminal prosecution. Although this action significantly endangered Ford's own political future, and many believe it cost him the next election, he argued that he did it to ensure that public trust in the government didn't deteriorate further. The country needed to heal. Move on. Stop being consumed by Watergate. It's considered a decision made with the consensus of both the ruling and opposition parties, though many Americans were furious about it. Nixon got away with it in a sense. No jail time, just resignation and disgrace. Now here's something proper wild. The way the Washington Post obtained the most important information about this notorious chain of events, the information that brought down a president, wasn't revealed for decades. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, the two journalists who revealed everything, said they received the information through a person with the pseudonym Deep Throat. For over 30 years, people speculated about who Deep Throat was. Theories everywhere. Could it be a cabinet member? A White House staffer? Someone in the CIA or FBI? It was only revealed around 2005, more than 30 years later, that the person who provided the information was Mark Felt. Who was Mark Felt? He was the associate director of the FBI at the time, the number 2 person in the FBI, and he was feeding information to journalists to expose what Nixon was doing. Why? Because he believed what Nixon was doing was wrong, that the president was abusing power and needed to be stopped. Felt took an enormous risk. If he'd been discovered while Nixon was still in power, his career would have been destroyed. He might have faced criminal charges himself, but he did it anyway, because he believed in the truth. When Felt's identity was finally revealed in 2005, some people called him a hero. Others called him a traitor. But one thing's certain. Without Deep Throat, without Mark Felt, Watergate might never have been fully exposed. The truth might have stayed buried. So that's the Watergate scandal, mate. An American president already winning by a landslide authorizes a burglary of his political opponents, gets caught, covers it up, abuses presidential power to obstruct justice, and gets destroyed for it. All because of paranoia. All because he couldn't trust the democratic process. All because he wanted total control. The lessons from Watergate are still relevant today. First, No one is above the law, not even the president. Second, a free press is essential to democracy. Journalists who ask uncomfortable questions aren't enemies, they're necessary. Third, power corrupts, and when power is unchecked, it corrupts absolutely. Fourth, whistleblowers matter. People like Mark Felt who risk everything to expose the truth. They're the real heroes. Nixon could have gone down in history as a great president. His foreign policy achievements with China and the Soviet Union were genuinely brilliant. But instead, he's remembered for Watergate, for the cover-up, for the lies. Because in the end, it's not the crime that destroys you, it's the cover-up. Nixon didn't resign because of the burglary. He resigned because he lied about it, because he tried to use presidential power to hide it. If he just admitted it early on, apologized, fired the people responsible, he probably would have survived. But he didn't, and it destroyed him. Watergate changed America forever, changed how Americans view their government, changed the laws, changed the presidency itself. And the word Watergate entered the language as a symbol. Now every scandal gets gate added to it. Climategate, Russiagate, whatever. All because of one burglary, one cover-up, one president's paranoia. If you enjoyed this deep dive into political history gone absolutely mental, smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what historical scandal you want me to cover next, and subscribe for more stories about how powerful people destroyed themselves through their own stupidity. Because history is full of them, mate. And they're all worth telling. Cheers.